Small towns look peaceful during the holidays. Christmas lights are up, neighbors smile a little more, and everything feels familiar and safe. But sometimes, the quietest towns hide the darkest secrets. Tonight, you're about to hear 6 disturbing Christmas horror stories from small towns. Stories shared by people who grew up there, passed through, or barely made it out. These are the kinds of stories locals don't talk about, and visitors aren't warned about. Listen carefully, because some Christmas secrets are better left buried. The strangest part wasn't that the Christmas parade stopped happening. It was that nobody agreed on when or why. I moved back to my hometown a week before Christmas after being gone for almost 10 years. It was one of those places people forget exist unless they grew up there. One main street, a diner that never changed its menu, and a water tower you could see from anywhere in town. Every December, the place used to feel alive. Lights wrapped around every lamppost, wreaths hung in storefront windows, and, at least in my memory, there was always a Christmas parade. On my first night back, I mentioned it casually while sitting at the diner with my old friend Mark. "Are they still doing the parade this year?" I asked. "Or did they move it to the weekend?" Mark looked at me like I'd asked something inappropriate. "The parade?" he said slowly. "What parade?" I laughed, assuming he was joking. "You know, the Christmas parade, floats, marching band, Santa at the end." He shook his head. "We never had a parade. I didn't push it. People forget things. Memories get fuzzy." But over the next few days, I asked around. My parents, old neighbors, even the woman who'd worked at the hardware store for as long as I could remember. Every answer was the same. No parade, not now, not ever. The thing was, I didn't just remember watching it. I remembered being in it. When I was 9, my elementary school class walked in the parade wearing oversized elf hats. I remembered the weight of the felt costume, the cold biting through cheap gloves, the way my feet hurt from marching on asphalt. I remembered waving at my parents and spotting my dad near the courthouse steps, filming with his old camcorder. Those weren't the kinds of details you imagined by accident. A few nights later, I dug through boxes in my childhood bedroom looking for proof. Old photo albums, VHS tapes, school yearbooks. I found birthday parties, soccer games, Christmas mornings, but nothing even hinted at a parade. That's when I found the flyer. It was folded inside a book I hadn't opened in years. Yellowed paper, cheap ink. At the top it read, "Annual Christmas Parade, December 23rd, 6 p.m. Below that were details I recognized instantly. The route, the staging area behind the high school. Even the line about participants must arrive 1 hour early. My hands were shaking when I showed it to my parents. My mom stared at the paper for a long time before pushing it back toward me. "Where did you get this?" she asked. In my room, I said. Mom, you remember this, right? She didn't answer. That night, I reached out to people from my old class on social media. Most didn't respond. A few did, and their replies made my stomach drop. One girl said she vaguely remembered dressing up for something but couldn't place it. Another admitted she remembered marching, but thought it was for Halloween. A third sent me a message that simply read, "I remember it too. Don't ask anyone else." We agreed to meet in person. 5 of us total. All people who'd grown up here and left. All back for Christmas. We met at the edge of Main Street, right where the parade route would have started. None of us said much at first. We didn't need to. The place felt wrong. Too quiet. No wind, no cars, just the soft hum of street lights. Then one of them said it. "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was my imagination. Then it became clearer. Faint music, a marching band, somewhere far away. Getting closer. The lights along the street flickered. We stood there, frozen, as shapes began to appear at the far end of the road. Floats, decorations, people waving, all slightly off. Their movements were stiff, their smiles too wide. At the end of the parade, I saw us. 5 kids in elf costumes, marching in a crooked line, exactly as I remembered. I don't know how long we stood there. I only know that when the music stopped, the street was empty again. Silent. Normal. None of us spoke. The next morning, I tried to tell my parents what happened. They acted like they couldn't hear me, like my words passed right through them. I left town the same day. Before I did, I checked the flyer one last time. There was something at the bottom I hadn't noticed before. Printed in small letters. Attendance required. This year, I won't be going home for Christmas. And if you grew up in a small town that insists something never happened, I suggest you don't go looking for proof. A guy I worked with moved to a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. His name was Eric. Quiet, normal, the kind of coworker you only talk to during breaks. One night in early December, we were stuck on a late shift together, and he mentioned he might not make it back after the holidays. "Family stuff?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not exactly. I don't think I'll be living there much longer." Eric had moved to the town a year earlier for cheap rent and peace and quiet. It was tucked away in the Midwest, the kind of place with one grocery store, 2 churches, and a population sign that hadn't been updated since the 90s. He said people were polite, if a little distant. Nobody rude. Nobody friendly enough to invite you over. The weird part, according to him, was Christmas. The first year, I didn't notice it, he said. I went to my sister's place for the holidays. This year, I stayed. Christmas Eve passed like normal. Lights on houses, cars in driveways, a few people waving when he walked his dog. But as the sun went down on Christmas night, something changed. By 8 p.m., the streets were empty. Not quiet empty, abandoned empty. Eric said he looked out his window and realized every single car on his block was gone. Not pulled into garages. Gone. Driveways bare, porch lights off, decorations dark. He assumed there was some town event. A midnight service. Maybe everyone drove to the next town over to visit family. Around 10 p.m., curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the moment before a storm, except the sky was clear. No wind, no distant traffic, nothing. He walked 3 blocks without seeing a single person. That's when he noticed the houses. The doors weren't just closed, they were locked from the outside. Deadbolts turned, chains visible through windows, like the houses were being sealed shut. At the edge of town, near the old grain silo, he finally saw headlights. A line of cars parked side by side on the highway shoulder, engines running, people sitting inside, staring straight ahead, not talking, not moving. Eric waved. No one reacted. He tapped on one window. The driver, an older man, slowly turned his head and whispered something Eric couldn't hear. Then the man shook his head and mouthed 3 words. "You shouldn't be here." Eric backed away. That's when he heard it. Footsteps. Not from the cars, from behind him. He ran. He didn't look back. He sprinted all the way home, locked every door, turned off the lights, and hid in his bedroom closet. He stayed there until sunrise. The next morning, the town was normal again. Cars back in driveways, lights on. People waving like nothing had happened. Eric tried asking questions, casually at first, then more directly. Everyone gave him the same answer. "We visit family on Christmas night." All of them. The same phrasing, the same tone. When he asked where they went, the answer stopped. That was the last Christmas he spent there. He told me he packed up 2 days later and left without saying goodbye. No forwarding address, no explanation to the landlord. I asked him why he never reported it. Called the police, took pictures. Eric shook his head. "I tried," he said. "Every photo I took that night came out black. And when I checked my phone later, all the timestamps were missing." He quit a month later. No big farewell, just gone. A few weeks after that, curiosity got to me. I looked up the town online. Population, unchanged for decades. No crime reports, no missing persons, no mention of Christmas events. But buried in an old local forum, I found one comment. No replies. Just a single post from years ago. "If you're new here, don't stay on Christmas night. Everyone leaves for a reason." I checked again the next day. The post was gone. In my hometown, Christmas lights weren't optional. Except for one house. I grew up in a small town where December felt like a competition. Every porch had lights. Every yard had plastic reindeer or glowing snowmen. People would actually drive around at night just to look at decorations. If your house was dark, neighbors noticed. If it stayed dark, they talked. The house on Pine Street was always dark. It sat between two perfectly normal homes, both covered in lights every year. One had a huge inflatable Santa. The other went all out with music and synchronized lights. And in the middle was a narrow, two-story house with peeling paint and curtains that never moved. No wreath, no lights, no sign that anyone celebrated anything there. When I was a kid, we made up stories about it. Haunted, abandoned, owned by someone who hated Christmas. But the truth was stranger. Someone definitely lived there. I knew that because sometimes, very late at night, a single light would turn on upstairs. Just one room. Never the same time. Never for long. The first year, I really noticed it. I was 14. Old enough to get bored of Christmas, young enough to still be curious. One night, after my parents went to bed, I stood by my window watching snow fall under the street lights. That's when the light came on in the dark house across the street. I don't know why, but I waved. The light turned off instantly. The next day at school, I asked around. Nobody knew anything. Teachers changed the subject. Friends shrugged. One kid told me his mom said not to talk about that house. That answer stuck with me. A week before Christmas, I finally asked my parents. My dad didn't look up from the TV. My mom froze in the kitchen, her hand still gripping a mug. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't what?" I asked. "Don't ask about that house." I pushed, told them I'd seen lights, that someone lived there, that it was weird. My mom sat down and lowered her voice. People used to decorate that house a long time ago. What happened? She hesitated, then said, "Christmas happened." That was all I got. On Christmas Eve, the town felt unusually tense. Decorations were still up, music still played, but people stayed inside. By 9 o'clock, Pine Street was empty. I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard something outside. Soft, rhythmic, like someone dragging their feet through snow. I looked out my window. The house on Pine Street had lights on in every room. Warm, golden light spilled through the windows. Shadows moved inside, not fast, not slow, just enough to show that the house was full. Then the front door opened. People began to step outside. They looked wrong. Their clothes were outdated, thick coats, old scarves, styles you'd see in black and white photos. Their faces were pale and stretched into smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They stood on the porch, all of them facing outward, like they were waiting for someone. I ducked down, heart pounding. When I looked again, they were gone. The lights went out. The house was dark. The next morning, Christmas morning, everything was normal. presents. Breakfast, forced cheer. I asked my mom what happened on Pine Street years ago. She finally told me. There was a family who lived there. Big Christmas people. Decorations, parties, music. One year, just before Christmas, their youngest son went missing. The town searched for days, weeks. He was never found. On Christmas Eve, the family decorated anyway. That night, neighbors saw lights on, music playing, laughter. The next morning, the house was silent. The family was found inside, seated at the table, smiling, frozen solid. Every Christmas since then, the house stayed dark. Because if you decorate it, if you acknowledge it, they come out to celebrate. I moved away as soon as I could. Last year I drove through town on Christmas Eve, just passing by. Pine Street was empty, but the house was lit, and someone was standing on the porch, smiling, wearing my face. Every family has a year they don't talk about. In mine, it was 1998. I didn't even know that year was off limits until I was old enough to notice patterns. Every time old photo albums came out around Christmas, there was a gap. Pages skipped. An awkward pause. If someone mentioned that winter, my mother would stand up and find a reason to leave the room. I assumed it was personal. A death. A bad memory. Families have those. It wasn't until my late 20s that I learned it wasn't just my family. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, or at least pretended to. Christmas there was predictable. Tree lighting, church service, cookie exchange at the school gym. Traditions didn't change. Except in December 1998. That year never came up. Not in conversations, not in local nostalgia posts, not even in the town's online history page. It was like someone had taken an eraser to it. The only reason I started asking questions was because of something my mother said on her deathbed. Her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. She grabbed my hand and said, "Whatever you do, don't ask about December 98. I laughed nervously and told her to rest. She squeezed harder. "They'll think you forgot," she said. "That's the only reason you're safe." After she passed, curiosity got the better of me. I started small. Town records, old newspapers. The local library had microfilm going back decades. December 1998 was there, but barely. Holiday ads, weather reports, a short article about a Christmas concert. No community photos, no human interest stories, no editorials. That alone was strange. Then I noticed the missing names. 4 people I recognized, neighbors from my childhood, just stopped appearing in records after that month. No obituaries, no moving announcements, nothing. I asked my aunt first. She lived 2 towns over and had always been more honest. When I brought up December 98, she went quiet. "You weren't supposed to remember that," she said. "I was a kid," I replied. What happened? She took a long breath. People disappeared. On Christmas Eve, to be exact. 4 of them, all unrelated, different ages, different parts of town, all vanished between sunset and midnight. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, no blood, just empty houses with lights on and dinner half prepared. The sheriff called in state police. Searches went on for weeks. Then something changed. Changed how? I asked. She hesitated. The town decided to stop. According to her, there was a meeting. Closed doors, no notes. After that, searches ended. The cases were quietly sealed, and everyone agreed, without ever saying it out loud, that December 1998 would never be mentioned again. Why? I asked. My aunt's voice dropped. Because the people who came back weren't right. 2 days after Christmas, all 4 missing residents returned. They walked home. No injuries, no confusion, no explanation. They claimed they'd never been gone, but the town knew better. My aunt told me people noticed little things, how they didn't blink as often, how their smiles lasted too long, how they avoided mirrors, how they never stayed outside after dark. By the next Christmas, all 4 had moved away. Or at least, that's what everyone said. I went back to my hometown that winter. Walked the streets, watched faces. At the grocery store, I saw a man who looked exactly like one of the missing residents. Only older. Too old. He noticed me staring. His smile spread slowly, deliberately. You look like you're trying to remember something, he said. That night, I found a box in my mother's attic. Inside were photos I'd never seen, Christmas decorations, familiar streets, and 4 pictures taken on Christmas Eve, 1998. Each one showed a person standing alone in the snow, looking straight at the camera. Behind them, barely visible, were shapes in the dark. Tall, thin, waiting. On the back of one photo, my mother had written a single sentence. They let them go because we promised not to talk. I put the photos back and left town the next morning. I don't ask questions anymore because sometimes forgetting isn't weakness. Sometimes it's part of the deal. I thought the clerk was joking when she slid the room key across the counter and told me not to leave after midnight. I'd been driving all day through a snowstorm that wouldn't quit. And by the time I reached the town limits, my phone had lost signal. The highway was closed ahead. The motel's neon sign flickered like it was running on a dying breath. I just wanted a bed. Is there food nearby? I asked. The clerk shook her head. Everything closes early tonight. It's Christmas Eve, I said. She met my eyes. Exactly. I laughed, thanked her, and took the key. As I turned away, she added, Seriously, Midnight. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone. I assumed it was local humor. Small towns love messing with outsiders. The room was clean but old. Thin walls. A radiator that knocked like someone trapped inside it. I ordered the last thing my phone could load and ate it on the bed while snow piled up outside the window. At 11:45 p.m., the town went quiet. Not the normal late-night quiet. Deeper than that. Like sound itself had been turned down. Even the wind seemed to stop. At 11:58, I heard locks. One by one along the street. Click, click, click. I checked my door. It was locked. I slid the deadbolt for good measure. Midnight hit. The streetlights flickered, then dimmed. Not off, just low enough to make shadows stretch in unnatural ways. I stood by the window, watching my breath fog the glass. That's when I saw movement. At the far end of the street, someone stepped into the light. Then another, and another. They walked slowly, evenly spaced, like they were following marks only they could see. No winter coats, no visible breath, just thin figures drifting closer. They stopped in front of the motel. One of them looked up at my window. I stepped back, heart racing. A knock came at my door. Soft, polite. "Hello?" a voice said. Male, friendly. "We know you're awake." I didn't answer. Another knock. Louder this time. "You don't belong here," the voice continued. "But it's Christmas. We're allowed to be generous." Something brushed against the door handle. Testing it. Down the hall, I heard other doors shaking, muffled cries, someone sobbing, someone praying. I backed into the bathroom and locked myself inside. No windows, just a buzzing light and the sound of my own breathing. The knocking moved on. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time felt wrong. When the sounds finally faded, I stayed where I was until my legs went numb. When I checked my watch, it was 6:12 a.m. The storm had stopped. I opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. Too empty. One room's door hung open, splintered. Another had deep scratches running down the wood, like something had tried to claw its way in or out. I went to the front desk. The clerk was there, sipping coffee like it was any other morning. "Did you leave your room?" she asked. "No," I said. I didn't. She nodded, relieved. "Then you're fine." I asked her what happens to people who do. She didn't answer directly. "Most of them don't lock their doors the next year," she said. "Some don't come back at all." I left town as soon as the road reopened. Later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for the town online. Found almost nothing. No official website, no Christmas photos, no reviews mentioning the motel. Just one warning buried in a travel forum, posted years ago. If you get stuck there on Christmas Eve, don't go outside after midnight. The town locks its doors for a reason. I don't travel on Christmas anymore. And when midnight comes on Christmas Eve, no matter where I am, I make sure my door is locked. The guy who told me this swore he only noticed it after his third Christmas there. I met him through a friend of a friend, one of those loose connections you only talk to once or twice. We were sitting in a bar off the highway, killing time, when he mentioned he used to live in a small town he couldn't bring himself to name. It wasn't dangerous, he said. Not in the usual way. That's what made it worse. He'd moved there for work. Cheap rent, quiet streets, nothing going on. The kind of town where people waved but never stopped to chat. Everyone was polite, everyone was distant. The first Christmas felt normal enough. Decorations went up. Snow fell right on schedule. The town hosted a modest tree lighting, nothing strange. The second Christmas felt rehearsed. Same decorations, same schedule, same phrases. He said people said Merry Christmas with identical timing and tone, like they were repeating lines they'd practiced. It wasn't until the third year that he noticed the pattern. He was at a holiday potluck at the community center when someone asked a simple question. "So, how long have you lived here?" The man answered easily. "Oh, a while now." Someone else asked, "Where'd you move from?" The man smiled, paused, then said, "Not far." That would have been normal, except it happened again and again. Every conversation, the same deflection. No one ever mentioned another hometown, no schools, no childhood memories from anywhere else. Later that night, my acquaintance tried something different. He asked a woman he'd known for years where she grew up. She laughed softly. "Here." He pressed gently. Before that, her smile faltered. There wasn't a before that. She excused herself and didn't speak to him for the rest of the night. That's when he started paying attention. No one in town had old photos from anywhere else. No stories about moving in. No nostalgia that reached beyond the town limits. Even the cemetery dates were strange. Many headstones listed birthplaces simply as the town's name. Christmas Eve was when it all clicked. He'd stayed late at work and was driving home when he saw lights on at the edge of town, near a field that was usually empty. Cars were parked there in neat rows, engines off, people standing outside staring toward the tree line. He pulled over. "Is there some kind of event?" he asked a man nearby. The man didn't look at him. "We're remembering," he said. "Remembering what?" The man finally turned. "Where we came from." The woods began to move. Not like animals, like shadows peeling themselves away from the trees. Tall shapes, thin outlines that didn't quite stay solid. The people didn't run. They stepped forward. My acquaintance left. He didn't stay to see what happened next. The next morning, the town was unchanged. Everyone acted normal, friendly even. But something was different. Some people were gone. Not missing, just replaced. New faces appeared in familiar houses. They had the same mannerisms, the same jobs, the same routines. But they didn't recognize him anymore. When he tried to ask about the people who'd vanished, no one understood what he meant. There's always been a Miller family in that house, they said. Always. That night, he packed. Before leaving, he stopped at the town sign, the one that listed the population. It hadn't changed in decades. As he crossed the town line, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Merry Christmas. Thanks for staying with us. He deleted it and never went back. When he finished telling me all this, I asked the obvious question. How do you know you weren't from there too? He went quiet. I wondered that, he said. So I checked. He pulled out his wallet and showed me his ID normal. Address from another state. Old photos on his phone, proof of a life before that town. But every Christmas, he added, I dream about it. In the dream, he's standing at the edge of the woods with everyone else, remembering. And somewhere behind him, something is learning his face.